Hey guys, welcome back. So you've ever noticed how often you hear the word resilience today, right? We're told, be resilient. We're praised for being resilient. We tell our children they need to be resilient. But if I wonder somewhere along the way, we've misunderstood what resiliency actually means. Now, I grew up Gen X in a Gen X household, right? And if you're a Gen Xer too, some of this might sound familiar. But if my parents walked into the living room and I was sitting on the couch, the first question was usually, why are you just sitting there? Right? And there was always something to clean. There was always something to organize. And there was always something to mow, something to pick up, something to do, something to fix. And usually there were severe consequences for not doing these, right? Rest was never encouraged. And in fact, I was actually taught rest was lazy, right? So you learned to stay busy, or they made you busy, even when you were exhausted. You kept moving, you kept producing, and you kept pushing through. And without realizing it, many of us have carried this into our adulthood, and we feel guilty when we rest. We apologize for taking days off. We convince ourselves that slowing down somehow means we are failing. And somewhere along the way, we started calling that resilience. And I don't think that's what resilience is at all. That's endurance. And those are two very different things. And we are called to endure, but we're also called to rest. So, endurance versus resilience, because words matter, right? Especially in holistic health. Because if we don't understand the words we are using, we may never understand what's actually happening inside our body. Endurance is your ability to continue through difficulty. Resilience is your ability to recover after the difficulty. So I want you to think about that for a second, right? So endurance is going to ask, how long can I keep going? Resilience is going to ask, how well can I recover? So a marathon runner needs endurance, right? We'll all agree to that. A healthy nervous system needs resilience. And if all we ever do is keep pushing without ever allowing ourselves to recover, eventually something begins to wear down and cracks will begin to show. So our bodies are incredibly designed. When we encounter a stressful situation, our nervous system responds exactly how it's created to do. Our heart rate will increase, our breathing will change, and the stress hormone like adrenaline and cortisol are released into the system to help mobilize energy so you can respond to what's in front of you. And that's a good thing. The stress response is not the enemy. It's actually one of the ways God has designed our bodies to protect us. The challenge comes when the body never gets the message that the danger has passed. When you're constantly rushing, constantly worried, constantly overcommitted, constantly chasing cats on the porch. Fergus, get down. Constantly saying yes when we should have said no. Our nervous system may remain active far longer than it was ever intended to. And over time, that chronic stress doesn't just affect how we feel emotionally. It can influence your sleep, your digestion, your concentration, your energy levels, your muscle tension, your mood. And researchers continue to study the many ways prolonged stress may influence your long-term health. And that's why recovery matters. Not because life should be easy. I mean, that would be great if we were all just, laying around eating grapes, but that's not reality. Because most of our bodies were well, our bodies were not designed to stay in survival mode forever. And that's pretty much what long-term endurance is survival mode, right? So this is the lesson I wish someone had taught me years ago, or maybe my mother, right? Rest isn't laziness. Laziness is avoiding responsibilities you genuinely need to do. Rest is intentionally creating space so your body and your mind can recover. These are not the same thing. So again, let's go back to the professional athlete, right? Nobody calls an athlete lazy because they have a scheduled recovery day. Recovery is part of becoming stronger, right? If you do any weightlifting, right, there's days off, right? So why do we believe our minds deserve less than our muscles, right? Maybe the strongest thing we can do is give ourselves permission to just stop. And that is why I got intrigued with holistic health all the way around. Because holistic health asks different questions. Instead of asking, what's the best herb, right? Like we've been taught in this quick fix society, it asks, what does the whole person need? Maybe today you need sleep. Maybe you need better nutrition, right? Maybe you need movement. Maybe you need a healthier boundary. Maybe you need to learn the word no and stick to it. Maybe you need therapy and counseling, right? Maybe you need prayer. Maybe you need a community or just a couple people you can depend on. Maybe you simply need permission to stop carrying everything yourself. And if you do, you have permission. Those things are not separate from your health. They are health. And sometimes after we've looked at the whole picture, right, then an herb becomes part of that thoughtful piece of the larger plan, right? So this is where we're going to bring in our herb of the day. So that's Motherwort. And I find it fascinating, and why I told the original story I did, because the botanical name, the interpretation for that, actually means lion-hearted. I'm not going to tell you the botanical name because I want you to remember lion-hearted, right? The cardiaca, right, means heart and refers to heart in the botanical name. And I love that name because that's usually tied to heart, right? If you watch The Wizard of Oz, right? Courage is moving forward with wisdom. And Motherwort is a member of the mint family. You'll recognize it by its square stems, deeply divided leaves, delicate pink to lavender flowers that bloom in whorls around the stem. And it's been used in Western herbal tradition for centuries, right? Historically, herbalists often turn to Motherwort as a calming nervine and in traditional support for women during stages of life. It also has a long history of traditional use for cardiovascular system, particularly when emotional distress and a racing heartbeat is tied to it, right? Despite its name, Motherwort is not for moms only. Historically, it became associated with people who spent so much time caring for everyone else that they forgot to care for themselves. And, you know, for some mothers, that definitely describes them. But for some people, that just describes them regardless if they have children or not, or maybe their dad. So I think that familiarity with that herb, we can definitely associate it with it today. So as always, let us think like an herbalist. So if someone says to you, I am overwhelmed, should I take Motherwort? Maybe. But that's never going to be my first question, right? My first response is going to be, well, tell me more. And it's not because I'm nosy. I just want to know, right? How long have you felt this way? What has changed recently? How are you sleeping? Are you waking rested after your sleep? How's your digestive these days, right? What responsibilities are you carrying that no one sees or chooses not to see? Do you ever feel guilty when you rest? When was the last time you laughed? What fills your cup? What drains it? If it's people, get away from them. Those answers matter because I don't formulate from buzzwords. I formulate for people. And the word stress means something different to every single one of us. So does burnout. So does mental load. Apparently, resilience has 1,000 different definitions as well, and nobody can comprehend endure till the end. And that's why understanding the story is often more important than memorizing the herb. Okay? So, modern research into Motherwort into Motherwort continues to grow, right? Again, scientists are identifying compounds and chemistries, and I'm fascinated by it because to learn the chemistry, you look at the body system, and when you're doing a holistic approach to things, right? Because I'm not just an herbalist, I study a lot of things. It reminds us that the traditional usage, when compared with the scientific research, really show why they react to our body the way it does. And again, the best herbalists appreciate both worlds, traditional wisdom and scientific research. They do work together. They really do. So, like every medicinal herb, Motherwort deserves respect. It's generally not recommended during pregnancy because of traditional concerns regarding uterine stimulation. If you have a heart condition or take any prescription medications, bleeding disorders, or are breastfeeding, it's important to discuss all herbs, especially this one, with the professionals, right? So, remember, one of the marks of a good herbalist isn't simply knowing what plant to recommend, it's also knowing what plants not to recommend, right? So, if there's one thing I hope you remember from today's lesson, don't confuse endurance with resilience. Endurance helps you keep going. Staying in endurance too long is survival mode, and resilience helps you recover from natural endurance. Recovery isn't a weakness. Recovery is not laziness, and recovery is part of the big design. The goal isn't to become someone who never gets overwhelmed. If you figure that out, please write a book. I will read it. The goal is to become someone who recognizes when it's time to pause, recover, and take care of themselves. Sometimes this is making sure that we go to bed at a regular hour and don't stay up sending reels, right? Sometimes it means setting healthy boundaries. Sometimes it means asking for help. Sometimes it means looking at our diet and go, what is my body lacking? Sometimes it's making sure you spend time with people who refill your cup instead of drain you. And sometimes after you've looked at the whole picture, you may want to add an herb like Motherwort to your plan. That is holistic health. This is not chasing a magical herb, but learning to take care of the whole person, right? And I want to use these relatable stories as we work through the nervine system, and especially pull in my own traumas, because I think people start to identify them better because like I said, right, your definition of the word might be different than my definition of the word, but if I start to tell stories, you start to go, I'm looking beyond the system, the symptoms. I'm understanding the pattern. Sarah's saying something that's really resonating with me. Maybe this does go all the way back to the time in childhood when we were told, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about. Like those types of things resonate well into adulthood, and we push ourselves sometimes further than we're supposed to, because even society tells you in this world of, I see you're drowning, but high five, I'm glad you're drowning, I'm drowning too, right? It's actually one of mine and Rivka's favorite memes we send back to each other when we're both in the thick of things. High five, I'm drowning. And it reminds us both to stop, breathe, and remember that rest and recovery are also part of a healthy, holistic outlook. And that way we remind ourselves to focus on taking care of ourselves to hopefully avoid long-term stress, because the world will tell you to keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, and suck it up. But that's not how we were designed to do. We can go for periods, but this is usually why people mentally crack, is because they're told to keep pushing. It's okay to rest your muscles, and it's okay to rest if you have an injury. But people feel bad when they tell their brain to take a day off. And I don't know why, because it needs days off too. No, that concludes my rant. But until next time, guys, I want you to stay rooted, stay curious, and as always, keep growing in grace.